listening to Digging Star Wars, your online journal of the films that inspired George Lucas to create the Star Wars saga. Hi, welcome into this episode of Digging Star Wars, where we're going to look at a John Ford classic western, Fort Apache, from 1948. And we have with us today a very special guest, Stephanie Frederick, who was supposed to be on our Blade Runner episode, and we had technical problems, so we're very excited to have Stephanie with us, our first female guest.
Woo!
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Hi, everybody.
We're going to rock it. Okay, and we're really excited to talk about this film. I've been waiting for a while to talk about John Ford's work, and this is a particularly interesting film for me because my first viewing of this was just a week ago, and I've seen some of his other work, so I was very excited to sit down and watch this. Just to kind of prep you, this is not one of John Ford's heavy award-winning films. He's perhaps more famous for The Searchers, which pretty much if you go to film school, you're force-fed to watch, which is an excellent movie, but you're forced to watch it. And he's more well-known for a film called Stagecoach, which Lucas borrowed elements from for Raiders of the Lost Ark. What's the other one we're talking about? Oh, My Darling Clementine, yes. So when it comes to American Westerns, John Ford's your man. So I was pretty interested in watching this film in particular because it is one of the few films on the Digging Star Wars list that I'm working with that is actually mentioned by name in the Star Wars The Magic of Myth book and was part of the Smithsonian exhibit back in, I think it was 1997.
Yeah, I was there. I barely remember that.
It was a really cool exhibit,
yeah,
but it was.
I was there. Yeah,
awesome. So it's kind of exciting to talk about it. I'm going to read the synopsis right off the back of the case. This is how we usually just whet your appetite about what the film's about. And again, our DVD comes from Mr. Phil Congleton, my personal library, so thank you, Phil. And this is a Warner Brothers DVD, and the back goes like this. The soldiers at Fort Apache may disagree with the tactics of their glory-seeking new commander, but to a man, they're duty-bound to obey, even when it means almost certain disaster. John Wayne, Henry Fonda, and many familiar supporting players from the master director John Ford's stock company saddle up for this first film in the director's famed Calvary trilogy. Roughhouse camaraderie, sentimental vignettes of frontier life, massive action sequences staged in Monument Valley, all are part of Fort Apache. So is Ford's exploration of the West's darker side. Themes of justice, heroism, and honor that Ford would revisit in later westerns are given rein in this moving, thought-provoking film that, even as it salutes a legend, gives reasons to question it. So I thought that's actually a pretty accurate description of this movie because we were talking before we started rolling here that when you watch this film on the surface, it reminds you a lot of, well, this is what a black and white western should look like.
Right. I mean, this is the westerns. If you're going to start getting into westerns or watch this one. It is the epitome.
Yeah, because you got
in a way.
Yeah, because you have the beautiful Monument Valley, which is great, and then you have the massive action sequences with literally the cavalry coming in. Yeah, here comes the cavalry,
yeah.
And the Apaches. The sad thing is that it's not as exciting as I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I thought it would be a little bit more harder on the action and a little less on the romance. Which, being a girl, okay, I get it. But, when I'm sitting down to watch an action flick or a western, be that, I really want to get into the mind of the characters and what they're thinking and, and not be sidetracked over here by a love interest. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, it's good because one thing, watching it for the first time and realizing Shirley Temple's in this movie. Right. She's, I guess, in her early 20s.
20s at this point, yeah.
And I got hung up on that. Right. Like, that's Shirley Temple as an adult. That was really weird. And
well, the gentleman who played her love interest is also her actual was actually her husband in real life.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
That was another thing, when I was doing research on the movie that I also found out, and that kind of threw me a little bit because I was like, okay, first off, where's the little girl with the ringlets? And,
right.
And then that's all I see when I think of her. And then
I had so many distractions. Not only that, and like to your point, like where's the little girl, but the fact that her name was Philadelphia. I got hung up on that.
Philadelphia Thursday.
Yeah.
So it was Okay.
Yeah. It was really bizarre, and
Yeah.
it was really interesting to see Henry Fonda and John Wayne. I thought both of them did a great job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the rest of I have seen some of these other actors before, and the other John Ford films I've seen. So it was nice. I understand the appeal of his work, and I watched a documentary last night on John Ford that was on the Young Indiana Jones DVD box set.
Okay.
And among the people interviewed in the documentary was Martin Scorsese, and Scorsese said over and over, "If you're going to watch a classic western, you watch John Ford." And having seen a few of his films, various parts of his career, all westerns, I see why Scorsese would say that, because he really does. He gives you everything that you would expect in a western, but Ford is pretty good about exploring, is this right? Like, should this really be happening?
Right.
And I think that's pretty cool. You just heard another excerpt from the Garth Ivan EP, the Cambodia Sessions, and I invite you to look on our blog for links to Garth Ivan's website. And all the tracks that you hear in today's session from Garth Ivan are also available on iTunes, and we will have a link for that as well. So I encourage you to go there and check it out. On with the show. Well, why don't you talk about what you found out about the film and what you think, having seen this film, the connections are to A New Hope.
Okay. Like I said, it took me a couple days to get through the film. Not that, again, that's, it wasn't that bad. I just had to put it down and come back. Put it down, like a good book. Put it down and come back. But,
it took me 2 nights.
Yeah. I really loved the film itself, the whole Calvary, the flawed characters, all of them, and, how they interacted with each other, and how, Henry Fonda's character just ended up coming full circle at the end there, and realizing that, it's not all about
orders and what we should be doing for the government.
Right, exactly, especially when you're on the frontier like that. And there's, it was an isolated area, if I remember correctly. They did have a cantina.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out
there.
Yeah,
they did. Yeah, they made it a point that it was like a quiet outpost. Yeah,
right.
like this is almost where you go to die.
Right. And that's what I think Henry Fonda's character was feeling. He had been in the Civil War. He had been demoted. And they sent him to this isolated fort out in Arizona. And so I think he was fighting internal demons of, that he was facing, of being demoted and being forced out here to where there was nothing but Indians and desert. John Wayne was a great... He's just John Wayne. I don't know what else to say about John Wayne. He's just John Wayne.
It's what's cool about it, too, is like you think, no way could one man live up to the legend that is John Wayne. And then you see him on screen, and you're like, this man... He not because of his character thing, but it's the same thing with Samuel Jackson stepping on the screen, where you just... There's just so much power when he's in the frame.
It's just a presence in the way he carries himself.
What's his character's name? I'm gonna say it's Kirby.
It's
York.
Kirby. Kirby York.
Yeah, it's just a very well written character.
Right, and played flawlessly by him. And you can see that you actually believe that he is the guy that should have been in charge, of course, and made all the connections and gave the respect to the tribes that they deserved. And that was just, it was very believable. You really thought, he was there.
Right.
And but you also thought that, he believed it.
Yeah,
too,
absolutely.
Which is nice to.
It was cool the fact that he was a little bit of both. Like he was a rebel.
Yeah.
Because he kind of did things his way, but at the same time, he followed the orders.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool.
We have to when you're a military man, right? So you got to do sometimes things that you don't want to do, even though. But I think now you have a little bit.
Yeah, it's a little
different.
Yeah. Now, I know you said that you went to the Magic Myth tour. Do you remember why that was part of the magic?
Han Solo is your cowboy.
Right.
Let's be for real.
Yeah.
And that was the ultimate cowboy that you
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And that was the cool thing, that as soon as you see John Wayne walk in frame, you're like, oh my gosh, that's Han.
Yeah.
With the pants and the way the holster's worn and everything else. So.
And just the way everything, just the way he dressed, just the way, he sat and he talked. It was a cowboy.
Yeah.
He is a cowboy.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Which is a fabulous thing. Love cowboys.
But,
anyway.
right. What were the?
Gotta love the cowboys.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What were the other things you found with A New Hope?
What I found really interesting on Tatooine,
Mm-hmm.
it's a desolate desert planet.
Mm-hmm.
Not much there except moisture evaporators and Jawas.
Right.
Don't forget the sand people. You have that there also at Fort Apache. So they're going out there and it's nothing but sand in each direction. You don't know which tribe's going to come up.
Right. No. Right.
History.
Right.
So you got you could get attacked by sand people. You got the Jawas out there. You got
right.
And then you have the cantina and where it's your little
It's your respite.
Yeah.
From everything. At your oasis.
Right.
Right.
Right. And that your cantina, your bar and that town is filled with such characters in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
You could write a whole story about that.
That's true, and it was kind of like way in the fort. Like you had, the older guys that are just going to wind up drunk or in trouble,
right.
And and then you got the young bucks trying to prove themselves. And
right.
I even thought it was interesting how they have all these things hidden. Like there's one scene in Fort Apache where people show up, and next thing you know, they're lifting the lid of an ottoman to pull out bottles of wine. and I thought that was cool. Yeah, and it's funny because it reminded me of the Falcon right away. It was like they could hide underneath the plates of the floor. So
smuggle everything in there.
Yeah, no, it was cool. It was very cool.
That's what really touched me. I think mostly about that was, the cowboy, besides the flawed characters, which is obvious, and then you have this desert, this moon of, this moon out there to the west that no one knew what it was about. And,
Monument Valley has a presence in a lot of his work, and because he shot a lot there, but and like I said, this particular film didn't rack up a lot of awards, but it did win Best Director, and it won Best Cinematography at the Locarno International Film Festival in Locarno, Switzerland. And you can see why. And it's funny, too, because I feel like when Peter Fay was one of my guests, and we talked about Lawrence of Arabia, it was the same thing, like, oh, this is how the desert should be shot in Lawrence of Arabia. And then you get to this movie, like, oh, this is how the desert should be shot in Fort Apache. And so it has that quality, and there's no doubt that Ford and his crew knew what they were doing.
Right. And
because you get a great idea of the space, but you don't lose track of the characters in the space.
Correct.
So that's pretty cool.
Correct.
I think you pretty much nailed it. Like, it's how the desert's shot and the cowboy. Now, I picked up a lot of little things, and the way I usually go about this is I say it, and you either thumbs up or thumbs down. So, I don't know, maybe that's a stretch, a coincidence or inspiration.
Okay.
I thought it was very interesting that the first line of dialogue in this movie, they mentioned the character. They mentioned Luke. Apparently, Luke's one of the horses. The guys on the stagecoach are. I think that's pure coincidence.
Yeah. I was gonna
but as soon as I plopped in and pressed play, I'm like, oh, I'm scribbling notes already.
Yeah, exactly.
And then and we already talked about the booze hidden in the
Yes.
chair. Do you think? I mean, do you think Han being that whole
Cowboy
cowboy?
Kind of guy?
Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I
thought that
do
was-
because
okay.
I think each cowboy had, a little, even White, he wasn't necessarily a sheriff, right? So
Right,
he
they-
wasn't always a sheriff.
Right. There's the dark side there, and
Right.
and we talked about this too. That I even noticed that whenever John Wayne, the Duke, is
Mhm.
standing on frame, I wonder how much Harrison Ford referenced that, if at all, because I
Yeah.
felt like they had that same, and maybe it just might be the way
It
a
was
holster
shot.
sits on
Yeah.
you, and you want to stand a certain way to be more comfortable, because they had like almost the same
Because
stature.
you do have that stance when you you throw a hip
Yeah.
holster on. You do get that kind of a. You automatically go into that.
It's like-
swagger,
it's like-
but what came first is the question.
Right. No, I think
Right?
I think that helps. It's like kind of like putting on a leather jacket.
Right.
Like you just feel a certain way
Yeah.
once you put on a leather jacket.
Hey. Sorry.
We already talked about the landscapes, which is cool. I'm really curious your opinion on this. There's a scene in Fort Apache, and this is a mild spoiler, but they send which character they send? I think it's Captain York. No, they send another. They send one of the characters. It's a younger.
Yeah.
It's the up and coming buck. I think.
Yeah, is it her?
Right?
Is it It's not her boyfriend.
It
is
might
it?
be.
Yeah,
but they send him out.
away.
They send him to an outpost, and you get the idea. It's a 2-man station with a cannon, whatever.
Mhm.
And when he goes out there, he finds that they've been killed.
Right.
Right. And there's this whole, the way it's not shot exactly like the Lars homestead when Luke comes up and finds Boo. But what
Yeah.
reminded me was this young guy coming up and finding 2 corpses in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And then the way it
Wow.
was shot was just him like, what do I do
What
next?
Exactly. Where do I go from here?
Yeah. Do you think
Yeah.
that is a pull?
I think it might be a pull a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I don't. To be a direct pull, I don't know. Maybe in the back of his head.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you definitely got an eerie feeling like, oh crap.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what the thing about it in A New Hope is. It's all sorrow
Right.
and Luke kind of coming to terms with it's the hero's journey. Lucas
Right,
loves
hero's
throwing
journey,
that out. The
yeah.
hero's journey. Now I'm free
Yeah.
to go and gallivant across the galaxy. But and
Yay!
yay, they're dead. No, but with Fort Apache, you definitely get like, oh, there's something bigger
Mhm.
coming, and but I felt that was very interesting that it had that similarity
Yeah.
to it.
No, I do remember that and thinking,
All right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
But different feeling.
totally. Like there's
Completely
different
different feeling.
points, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it. Like Lucas taking a spin on it. Another thing I thought was really geeky was when John Wayne and his Spanish-speaking comrade
Mhm.
Buford, I think his
Mhm.
name, Captain York and Buford.
Yeah.
When they go, they're sent on this mission to find the Apache tribe that has gone south of the border. Thursday wants them to bring them back onto their soil.
Right.
And at the time, York doesn't know it's to bring back on soil to wipe them out.
Right.
But when they go down and they come back, there's a scene where John Wayne and the other guy, they're on their horses and they're in the middle of this flat plain. And they see the horizon to the left and the horizon to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And when they look to whichever direction, look one of the directions, off in a distance, you see this little shining light. Little blink, and then they look at it, and then you see them, and next thing you know, they're surrounded by Apaches. And
Yeah.
I saw that, and I was watching it with Christy, and
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, that's 3PO.
Yeah.
That's 3PO when he's in the desert and he
you
sees.
see that
And
shine.
I don't know about you, but watching A New Hope,
Wow.
I'm always confused why 3PO would jump up and down and wave at that thing. I know he's in the desert. I know, but he sees this flashing and he's automatically like, I'm saved, and he starts waving.
Woo,
And I'm
yeah.
thinking how scary that place is. They walk by a dragon skeleton.
Yes.
If I see a flashing light in distance, I don't know if I jump up and down right away.
But 3PO was innocent in that way.
I know.
That he,
Oh, yeah.
Depending on what you believe, he was never on that planet before.
Right. Or yeah. Well, he doesn't remember. Or,
Yeah, his
right.
memory was wiped.
Right. But I thought but the way that scene in Fort Apache
Mm-hmm.
was shot, I don't want to say shot for shot, but almost shot for shot, is very similar to 3PO.
It's exactly like thinking about it now, thinking back on it, it's almost amazing how he took it and
Because when you even in a Fort Apache, when you first see that flashing light, again, this is Fort Apache's a slower storytelling pace. I imagine audiences sitting in the seat was like, what is that? Like,
right.
And then, John Wayne's character knows. It knows because he knows the Apache tribe, and he knows that he knows how they work. So
he knows the people.
All right. So I thought that was kind of cool how it was shot that way and then referenced in A New Hope. And the other thing is, and this has nothing to do with A New Hope, was I felt this, I know you said you haven't had the opportunity with how old's your little one?
3.
Yeah. So explains why you're so tired.
Yes.
No, so you're not up to speed on all the Clone Wars.
No, I'm not.
But this particular movie, I caught one action, and I thought it reminded me a lot of there's an episode in season 1 called Trespass, and at the end of Fort Apache, after the battle plays out the way it plays out, what was the name of the Apache chief again? Cochise. Right. He throws his staff into the ground a certain way, and it's very definitive, and it speaks volumes to John Wayne about what has just transpired. I'm trying not to give too much of the movie away, but what has just transpired. And it's the same type of action that's in this Trespass episode in Clone Wars. There's a native species on an ice planet, and Anakin and Obi-Wan are dealing with a warring species, and it's a territorial war. And I just focused in on the throwing the staff down on the ground, and then the more I talked about the episode with my wife Christy and with my 8-year-old son Peter, it was like, wow, this is very similar. This is like there's 2 different people here. They're fighting over land. They're fighting for what's right now. I mean, the battle at the end is really just the survival of the Apache people. It's not necessarily the land, but again, with what John Ford did in a lot of his films, the cost of victory is played out, and is it really a victory? And I think Scorsese said in his documentary last night, like, was the West won or was it lost?
Lost.
And you get that a lot in John Ford's work. That whole idea of losing the land too is another thing that Ford played with a lot. The other film I could think of that did it was he did The Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing movie. And it's the same type of thing about how important the land is. And I think, kind of circling this all back, that's why he kept revisiting Monument Valley. Right. Like, besides being just a great location and away from the studios, but he has this tie to the landscape, and it, to your point, it's when you watch this movie, it reminds you so much of how Tatooine was shot.
Right. I mean, it's his eye for landscape and even cinematography, and that's what he wasn't doing, but it had a connection. He had a connection to that land, and you saw that in his work, and you could tell he felt for the West. He felt for the Apache. He felt for, even Thursday, I think.
I know when Star Wars initially came out in the 70s, a lot of critics who panned it was like, it's just a Western in space. And
right, I remember that.
I don't, as a kid, I saw it, but I didn't. And as you see more films, you get a little more, knowledgeable, or you just see more stuff. You begin I get it. So, watching this film and considering that this is one of the films that's referenced in Magic of Myth, I see why, but Star Wars just cranks it up so much.
No, it does. I mean, I remember that being compared to Westerns. I do. And I just, okay.
Right. Like, sort of.
Sort of. Maybe it was because I was so young and I was just like, duh, it's in space.
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't, but I do get, now that you're older and you look back and, you're playing, Luke Skywalker outside with your sticks, and
sure,
you're also playing cowboys and Indians at the same time.
Right.
So
It's just, yeah.
There was a big difference to me no matter what, I think. But I get where, now that I get what they're saying.
Right. I want to thank you very much. I know that you really wanted to talk about Blade Runner, and I'm sorry when that didn't work out. But I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this and join us.
Yeah, anytime. I love it.
Cool.
Have me back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, and I want to thank everyone for listening. If you've seen Fort Apache and want to post a comment on our blog, you can do so at diggingstarwars.blogspot.com. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you do, and feel free to come back and comment. And please join us next month. We're going to look at The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and we're going to compare it with The Empire Strikes Back. I'd also like to thank Garth Ivan for contributing his music from his latest EP, The Cambodian Sessions. Please check out his music on his website and on iTunes. So once again, thank you very much for listening, and Steph, thanks for being here.
Yep, thank you.
Digging Star Wars is produced by Mitch Media and has no connection to Lucasfilm Limited whatsoever. Copyrights for films, trademark characters, and related materials discussed in Digging Star Wars remain with their respective owners. For a list of references or source material, please send an email to diggingstarwars@gmail.com.